Here we are at the Apollo Theatre in Shaftesbury Avenue, where Peter Davison is due to go on in Dial-M for Murder any minute.
Any minute.
But before you do that, let's talk about Doctor Who.
Right.
How did you get the part?
Well, I suppose it dates back to when I was doing All Creatures Great and Small, and the production unit manager on that was John Nathan Turner. And he left, I think after the first series of All Creatures, to become the producer of Doctor Who. And that was it as far as I was concerned. You know, I hadn't spoken to him for some time. I think I'd seen him around the BBC. And he just rang me up out of the blue one day in 1980 or 81. It's going to be good, isn't it? And said, told me that Tom Baker was leaving the series, which no one knew at that time, and I didn't really understand at first why he was telling me this. And then said, how would you feel about being the next Doctor? And there was this huge gap on the phone, pause on the phone, and he said, well, let me take you out to lunch and we'll talk about it. So we did that the following week, and after a lot of humming and hawing, because it did seem an extraordinary move. I mean, it was great to be offered the part, but it was actually an enormous sort of leap as far as Doctor Who was concerned, I felt. A series which I had watched since it started. That it took a little bit of persuading that it was the right thing for me to do, but eventually I was persuaded, not least because I couldn't bear the thought that I had been offered it, had turned it down, and then was unable to say to everyone, I was offered that. So I took it.
Were you the first choice?
I think I was the first choice, yes, as far as I know, yes.
And how did you feel taking over from Tom, who was, I suppose, the Ken Barlow of Doctor Who, wasn't he? Well,
it was a bit awe-inspiring simply because of the length of time that he'd done it for. Oddly enough, not because of Tom himself, simply because I was doing other things. I hadn't really watched very many of his stories. My doctors really were William Hartnell and Patrick Troughton.
Sure.
And I kind of sort of tailed off a bit. But I knew that he'd become very definitely Doctor Who. Mm-hmm. So it's a bit of a worry to suddenly be, faced with the idea of taking over from him and trying to convince people who may be younger people who hadn't actually ever seen another Doctor that I was, the new Doctor.
Did you have an immediate response from the fans?
Oh, it was terrific. The response was terrific. I mean, it was extraordinary, and this is before I appeared, which is probably just as well. But no, it was great acceptance. I think that's the great thing about Doctor Who fans is that they do tend to accept every twist and turn that the series takes.
Now, you were quite young, weren't you? You were 30?
I think I was 29 when I was offered it.
Because a lot of people are saying that actually Paul McGann is the youngest actor, but he's actually 36, 37.
Right, yes.
So you were very young taking
I was,
the part.
much younger, yes. Yeah.
So the first day of filming happens. How did you feel there? Presumably you were there with Tom, presumably, weren't you?
I was there the very first day, yes, which is where actually I did the transformation. That was an extraordinary evening because I arrived at about 6 o'clock and we were due to do the change into me at about 7:30 or something. But of course, because of, as I was to learn later, everything in Doctor Who is done at the last minute and against enormous pressures of time. We actually got round to doing it about 9:45 in the evening, and at that time you had to stop dead on 10 o'clock. There was no question about going over. And there's been this character called, I kept calling him the Lurker, but he's not the Lurker. But there was this character sort of dressed in white that was eventually...
Yes, the Watcher.
Was the Watcher? It was the Watcher, yeah. Which I rather, jokingly called the Lurker. So he was all in white. So my first appearance, as I changed from Tom I had to go through this process of going into this white makeup. So they covered me in white makeup, first of all. And we got that shot done at about, 10 minutes to 10. They then had to take me out of that, take me into makeup, take all this white makeup off, wash my hair, remake me up and get me out there just in time to do the actual thing where I had to wake up and sit up as the new Doctor, which was done with about 15 seconds to spare, I think. When my surprised look on my face is more to do with the astonishment we actually managed to get it in than the acting involved.
When you, in your first season as Doctor Who, how did you feel at the end of that first season?
By the end of this first season, not too bad. I think I'd started off with a kind of blank sheet of paper, as you always do with Doctor Who. We didn't do this first stories in order. We did 4 to Doomsday first, and then went back to Castrovalva.
Because your hair changed length.
It changed length, enormously, because I'd just come out of something else. So we sort of did it the wrong way around, which was good as far as trying to find the character was concerned, I think. And the stories in the first season were okay. I mean, they've mostly been commissioned as Tom stories, but nevertheless.
Really? So it must have been a very late decision for him to bow.
Well, no, because they commissioned them very early on. I mean, Castrovalva was done quite late on, but I think 4 to Doomsday and several others have actually been first commissioned. The assumption being, that they were going to be Tom Baker stories. They were maybe then slightly rewritten as far as for me, but I think they were at that point, commissioning quite far ahead. Yes, it wasn't. They weren't too bad. The first season wasn't too bad, I think. I was quite pleased to have got through to the end of it, really. It seemed like a long haul.
Did you, at the end of your first season, did you feel, right, I'm the Doctor now? Or did you still have the shadow of Tom Baker?
You have the shadow of all the Doctors. I think I more had the shadow of, as I say, my Doctors were William Hart and Patrick Troughton. I mean, I felt that they were the people who, for me, were the Doctors. But I appreciated that, well, certainly as far as America was concerned, by that time I'd done my first Doctor Who convention in America, they really only knew Tom Baker in the series. But they did know me because of All Creatures Great and Small, which was quite good. No, I don't think I ever felt... I felt neither one or the other, actually. I don't know that I felt quite that I was the Doctor, exactly. But I didn't really feel under the shadow of Tom.
Right.
I mean, it was more sort of that I was still, trying to establish myself just on my own. I didn't feel that I was intimidated by anybody else.
During... correct me if I'm wrong here, but during your second season... with Earthshock, which is a cracking story. One of the characters gets killed, the main character, Adric, gets killed, which was kind of unusual.
Was, yes.
I read somewhere that he wasn't very happy about that.
No, I don't think he was.
How did you feel about that?
I thought it was a good idea. I mean, he was going to leave the series for a start. I mean, that was established. I mean, John had decided that there were too many people floating around the TARDIS, and that sort of Matthew was going to leave, and I thought it was a good way to go out because I think it just established the possibility that such a terrible thing could happen, which I think is good for the drama of the series. Otherwise, you do get into this endless thing of every story ends with the cliffhanger: is the Doctor or one of the companions going to die? And of course, they don't. So I think that kind of thing, and it was a point where one could be touching and poignant and just make it a good dramatic story. Did
you feel that you were overladen with companions?
A bit, yes, a bit. I mean, it was a rather strange situation because I was a younger Doctor. I was kind of given this instruction that I wasn't really allowed to put my arm around the female companions, but was allowed to put my arm around the male companions. So I was allowed to sort of hug Adric and things like that, but not, Nyssa or Tegan. Just a little strange. I quite liked, I quite liked that ensemble part of it, to tell you the truth. Particularly, I think I came at some point to think, I can't remember quite when I came to think this, that actually the Doctor works best with just one companion. and preferably female, given that the Doctor is male.
Do you have a favourite story?
My favourite story, for a long time, it was Earthshock, which I did think was an excellent story.
Even Beryl Reid as the captain, you'd think it was an immediate turn-off as an idea, but she was great.
Yes, she was very good, yes, and it was a great story. But then later, I think overall, my favourite story is Caves of Androzani, which is the last one.
Which I think is one of the best Doctor Who stories of all time.
Yeah, it was terrific. It was marvellous. It was a great one to go out on, really.
Were you sorry about that? I mean, what a great one to go out on. Were you sorry to leave?
No, I think I felt that I'd been quite brave to leave, actually, because when as the incumbent Doctor Who, you can go on. John said, "Do you want to go on?" And it was just something about the fact that I'd done 3 series of it, and my life up to that point had tended to go in 3 series of everything that I'd done. I'd done 3 series of All Creatures, 3 series of Sink or Swim, 3 series of Holding the Fort, comedy series I was doing. And I just felt that this was the right thing to do, that if I'd carried on, I might then find myself having been in it for 7 years. And because I was quite young at the time, I also saw, my contemporaries coming in to rehearse parts in other things, going off and then coming back again to play parts in other things. And I just felt I was slightly missing out on and when I said William Hartnell, Patrick Troughton done 3 years each, I just felt it was the right thing to do. I mean, I didn't feel sorry. No, it was great to go out in a great episode. If you mean, because it was a great story, did I then think, oh God, I should have carried on?
That's right, because I also felt watching the show that by the time you reached your 3rd season, you really got under the skin of the Doctor you were playing. And a lot of those, particularly with, I've just forgotten the name of the story, but it was the one with those very funny monsters, the Tractators.
Oh, yes. Yes, gosh, yes. What was that story
What was it called?
Let's talk amongst ourselves.
Someone will write and tell us. But that story, and then there was the one that was set in Lanzarote, was it, with Peter Wingard?
Oh, that's right, yes.
And I really felt that you actually got under the covers of the character and you're very comfortable with it, and then the next thing, you'd gone.
Yes, well, I suppose that is true. I mean, when I actually made the decision to leave, it was actually at the end of the 2nd season, which I wasn't really happy with the last few stories of the 2nd season. I mean, this has come up again in some other tape I've done when I got into great trouble about saying something. But the story
was crap, didn't it?
Time flight. But I actually have never seen this videotape. So while we're on the element to talk about this, to my knowledge, I would never have said that Doctor Who overall generally was crap. That was not my thinking. That's never been my thinking, and I would never have said that, intending that to be said, because I don't think it. If I did say that, what I was talking about was Time Flight, which we simply ran out of money, and it was a fairly good story, but was shot in Studio 8 at the BBC with perspective sets and models of Concorde, in the background, and just a bizarre mixed in. It was such a shame. It was actually a very good story to do. I mean, we had fun doing it, but because it got so silly. And I felt kind of frustrated. Also, 2 or 3 of those stories in the 2nd season, we got into terrible trouble because we didn't manage to finish the filming of it, by 10 o'clock, and there were all sorts of sort of kerfuffle. And at one point, I remember we didn't have time to film the final scene of a story in the right set. We had to film it in a different set, and without ever blocking it, at 2 minutes to 10. The production manager said, "Just go on and just say the words. Just go on and stand there and say the words, and we'll film it." And so I said, "Well, we don't know where we're going to go. So just go on there." So we went on there, and there were the monsters or whatever. And we were there, and we did the final scene, but no one knew what we were doing, and you got a kind of great buzz out of it because we did actually manage to do it. The cameraman managed to find us. We managed to stand next to each other in the light. But when you watch that back, you don't know that. The audience doesn't know that. What they see is a slightly under-rehearsed piece. So I was frustrated by that side of it. And this thing that I knew I was going to be doing 3 years, it was a question of whether I carried on. And I just thought what I should do, the brave decision would be now to burn my bridges and say I will leave after the 3rd season.
In retrospect, would you like to have gone on for a 4th?
In retrospect, if you could isolate Doctor Who, I would like to have gone on for longer. Overall, I think it was the right thing to do for me. It was the right career thing, if you like, to do, because I went on and was lucky enough to go on to other things.
Right.
And it didn't sort of, stand in my way. But
you weren't typecast?
No. But if you isolated just about Doctor Who, if one could have fitted 5 seasons into the 3 years that it took to do 3 seasons, I would have liked to have done more. But
what about the monsters? I mean, I know that John Pertwee hated the Daleks because he couldn't interact with them. Did you have a favourite or
Well, I always liked from being young. I always loved the Cybermen, so I was. I think they still remained my favourite because they I suppose because they could move fairly easily as well, and that was sometimes the trouble with the monsters if they were too big and bulky. The idea that they would chase you down a corridor was a bit silly. They couldn't move more than about 2 miles an hour. But the Daleks, I have to say, moved like greased lightning.
Really?
Oh, terrifying! Absolutely terrifying. Doing a scene with the Daleks, I had to do one where I was cornered by about 5 or 6 of them. Frightening stuff.
That was also in your 3rd season, wasn't it?
Yes, it probably was.
And that was another cracking story.
Yes, it was. Yeah.
And again, they seem to have adopted this idea of bringing people in guest stars in, like Rodney Bewes was in that, and we said Beryl Reid was in an earlier one, who were totally unlikely, you'd think, miscast, but in fact they worked brilliantly.
Yes, I think that always did tend to work. I mean, I have to say that I think the connection there with Earthshock is Eric Saywood, who wrote the script, who I do think was the best writer that, I think he was terrific, and I think those stories that he wrote were terrific Doctor Who stories. He just seemed to be able to combine that nice idea that, historical sense that, with as in Earthshock, that, about the dinosaurs and that kind of thing. Those are the stories I always loved. When a kind of piece of historical fact was explained as Doctor Who having something to do with it.
Yes.
I just thought he was terrific at writing those stories.
After you had left the show, for a lot of people, it went off the boil. It went off the rails, both story-wise, casting-wise. A lot of criticism has been levelled at Colin Baker and Sylvester McCoy of being somewhat miscast. How do you feel about that?
I don't think that's true. I think it just went slightly. I did think it slightly went off the rails, but I think it was almost because I think it was because the combination of John and myself actually, although we had our sort of disagreements about certain aspects of it, was actually quite good in that he. When he took over, when Tom Baker left, I've described it as being almost as if, no jokes were allowed. He got so tired of the kind of undergraduate sort of humour of Doctor Who that suddenly there was a joke ban. And I did my best, because I'd come from, like comedy, All Creatures Great and Small. I did my best to kind of squeeze, the jokes in. And I remember at producers' runs, I'd have to try and get them by, and he'd go, well, I don't know about that. I go, oh, God, let's do this little joke here. And he'd go, oh, okay, fine. I mean, I don't get many by, but anyway, we got a few by. And, we would discuss, and I mean, obviously he was the producer, so he made the decisions about what happened, but nevertheless, I had certain ideas about things, and he had certain ideas. And I think what happened was, by the time I left in a funny kind of way, I convinced him about the jokes. But then there was no one to play the other side, you see. And I think it went off the kind of rails. I think like Colin's costume suddenly became a kind of bizarre, loud thing, and it got a little silly. And there was no one then there to say, well, let's not get so silly now. Let's actually think about. Keeping our feet on the ground and making it. I had this big thing about that the jokes were fine in Doctor Who, and I did like them, but the drama of it was really, you could never make those jokes when the drama was going on, because that was what really was the essence of it, is that there was that kind of confrontational thing. You know, the Doctor was trying to do his best to save the situation, and if you got into that kind of rather frivolous thing of it, it wouldn't really quite work. So it was always the dramatic side of it was also quite important to me. I mean, I don't think it was anything to do with Colin. I mean, Colin's short term as the Doctor, I think, was a political thing. I don't think it was actually anything to do with the success or not of the series. I think it was just...
Although they had moved at one point, after, when you took over, they moved it from its traditional Saturday night to midweek.
Yes.
And how, did that affect the ratings?
The ratings went up. You see, the thing about it was that you know, everyone quotes the big Tom Baker viewing figures, but I think there was the biggest Tom Baker viewing figures was an episode or a story in which Mary Whitehouse had complained about the violence or something in it, and of course immediately, you know, everyone watches, brilliant. But generally speaking, the audiences were in decline over the last couple of years of Tom's time, and it was almost as if Doctor Who was an institution that was on at Saturday tea time. Everyone loved it there, everyone wanted it there, but people didn't actually watch it.
Right.
You know, everyone knew it was there, no one wanted it to be moved, but they never used to see it. And I felt exactly the same way. I felt, oh God, you know, you can't move it from Saturday. That's the way it's got to be. And I thought, well, actually, I never watch it. You know, I mean, what am I talking about? So, in fact, the viewing figures went up considerably when we moved it to midweek.
When, having left the show, obviously you're still involved with it because of conventions and whatever. Do you do many conventions?
I do. Let me see. How many have I done? Maybe one this year, I think. I do a few, and the only reason I don't do them is not to distance myself at all. It's simply that they're actually hard work. You know, if you do an American convention, you have to smile for 3 days. I mean, it's tough. You get back to your hotel room at night and your face is like, yes. And the conventions over here are fine, but it's just that usually, you know, on the only day that one has off, and you have to sort of, you know, go up to wherever it is, Leeds or whatever, to do it. But I do try and do a couple.
Do they separate Peter Davison, the actor, from Doctor Who, or do they think you should know what?
Oh, in America when I went over, they were asking me questions about you know, Patrick Troughton's time. What is this about? And I said I won my one fatal flip remark, and when I went my first trip to America, I think. He said, how are you going to approach your role as the Doctor? And I said, I'm going to open the envelope with the script inside and read it. That'll be it, you know, I'll say the words. And of course they didn't really like that at first. They kind of thought that was a little bit kind of, well, you know, it should be more kind of deep thinking about the role of the Doctor.
Did you see the recent film?
I did see it, yes.
And what did you think of that?
Well, I was... I actually had a very open mind about it. I would have loved to have liked it. I didn't actually like it, but... and inevitably, I think, because it was Americanized, and that in itself is not necessarily a bad thing, but it removes the things that are good about Doctor Who in a kind of funny kind of way and make them more traditionally American. The story could have been any story from, you know, it could have been a Batman story, it could have been a Superman story, you know. It was well done and very effectively done, and you know, I've no objection to it as a series, but it seems to me that it wasn't really Doctor Who. It didn't have that kind of essence of Doctor Who.
He was terrific, I thought. Probably.
Yeah, he was great, yes.
He's a great actor, isn't he?
Well, yes. And the thing I missed about it really was the thing to do with the almost like the storylines in Doctor Who were quite complex and quite, you know, and had a sort of certain nice rambling quality to them in a way, you know what I mean? And I know it was a film, but I still don't think that was the problem. It was just that it was a very well constructed, you know, exciting story where the Doctor saves the world by midnight, you know, and And as I say, as such, there's nothing wrong with that. It just didn't seem to me to be, the Doctor. They seem to somehow have lost an essence of Doctor Who.
And an American master.
Yes.
Played like a sort of American pantomime dame.
Well, it was. I suppose, in a way, I'd hoped that for more, simply because the man who made it, I guess, was very keen on Doctor Who. It wasn't as if they just got this idea and decided to. So I was surprised that it didn't have more of,
If they came to you tomorrow and said, "Look, we're going to make a new series. We'd like you to come back."
No, I wouldn't. If they came to me in 41. If they came to me in about 20 years' time, I would do it, yes. Because then I could just do it till I dropped. Because it would be a great sort of a thing to do late on in your career, in your sort of William Hartnell time. It would be terrific.
Well, let's live in hope. Peter Davison, thank you very much indeed.
Yeah.